Hello and welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked and I am joined on this occasion, as most occasions, by James Kearney. How's it going, James?
I'm very well, thanks. Doing not bad. How are you getting on?
Yeah, good. No complaints. What are we going to talk about? Oh, yes, I know what we're going to talk about. The Meet the Manager or Meet the Management Team event that was held in the Gorgie Suites at Tynecastle Park on Wednesday night. It was organised by Foundation of Hearts, and it was an event, I think probably the first of a few, where the club are essentially trying to bring the fans, the pledgers, the owners closer to the club. And I know last night Steven Naismith was really keen to do it. He wanted to get that engagement from the fans to kind of help them understand what the management team are trying to do, what direction they are trying to take the team in. And it was a fascinating night. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty impressive presentation. It was across 90 minutes. It was so basically Steven Naismith presented kind of slides, looked at how they train, how they prepare for training, how they analyse games, how they prepare for facing teams. They looked at stats, player pathway from 18s to B team to the first team. And then there were some questions from Robert Bothrick, who was hosting the event, and then opened up to a Q&A. And I think this is not just Hearts specific, but I think a lot of clubs, you think, oh no, there's a Q&A with fans, there's going to be some daft questions. But it was actually, the questions were absolutely brilliant. By and large, they were spot on in terms of what the night was about. There was a lot of kind of analytical or questions which were based around what Steven Naismith presented. So obviously I've put up a big piece on the site, fully kind of tried to get as much detail in there as possible to see what, to kind of just for those who weren't able to make it, to kind of give an idea of what was discussed and why. Having read it, James, because we'll look at kind of the biggest, the most interesting takeaways from it, maybe get 5 or 6, but I've got a few in mind. But from yourself, who read it earlier on, was there anything that stood out for you?
Well, just first off, I should just say I'm just gutted I'm not a Foundation member, because like nights like that that's right up my street. Those are the kind of things that I absolutely adore. I was very jealous I didn't get to go along, but thankfully, I've read your piece, so I've had a decent idea of what was spoken about. I just think in general, I think that nights like these are really good. I think they're really helpful for, like you say, just helping fans to understand what it is that's going on, open up that dialogue between the management team and the supporters, and it definitely helps the fact that the team are in a good position as well. Yeah. You know, if you hold this meeting in October, say it's maybe a bit different. It's maybe not quite as maybe that at that point the Q&A does get towards the end, maybe it gets a wee bit mad, but like you say, I think these kind of things, I think they are good. And I think I've been to ones before where when a team isn't playing well and they do these kind of nights and it doesn't work out, and it's not really, it's basically just a queue of people lining up just to shout at the manager for a bit. By all accounts, this was not that, so that's nice. That's always good straight off the bat. Certainly, I think the team's recent form, obviously Naismith's got a good bit of credit in the bank with supporters because of that, especially the win over Celtic, the win over Hibs recently, of course. Looking through it, it was, I think, just one of the things that kind of stood out to me is, this might be flippant or maybe just be a silly point, but I was really impressed that they use a drone for all their training sessions. They use a drone and then they watch the footage back. But just because obviously it's in Orion, so you think it must be quite dangerous flying a drone around indoors like that, because those things can go quite fast and they got a bit of weight to them. And oh, you're on mute, Joe. You've muted yourself somehow.
Sorry. I muted myself to try and take a drink of water, so you don't have to hear that. So at the Orion, there's they mostly train outside. So that makes a lot more sense. There's an indoor training facility, but they only usually use that when the weather is really bad, or if they maybe want to use it for the Astros. So yeah, they've got the drone, which was good, because that's how the clips that were shown last night, vast majority, I think all of them were from the drone. So I'd imagine it's something that's used around world football, like kind of bigger clubs have managed to give that kind of bird's eye view. But that's it. It's just how it struck me how much detail goes into the training. Is the fact that they use the drone to then allows the management team to watch back all training sessions. Then it helps. Then they take clips. So usually it's just like it's like things like the drone. You just imagine using the clips from games as analysis, but they actually use clips from training to then kind of educate the players or to kind of develop training for like a kind of future. And I found it interesting that they clip things up and send them out to players via WhatsApp as well.
Yeah, I like that. Again, it's just I like the idea of being like, oh, it's more the kind of social side of it, of going like, oh, Joe, I've noticed this thing about this player's game, that's something they could be doing, and just sending them a WhatsApp being like, by the way, look at that. You know, we'll talk about it tomorrow and when we're in training or whatever. I like that. I really like that idea of just the individual nature of it. Just constantly just giving players little tips and just making the most of things that like WhatsApp that obviously, you go back 10 years ago, didn't really exist, or you couldn't do that. So I think that's quite nice. So the drone thing certainly jumped out at me. So that was quite a nice touch. The other thing as well, to be honest, was the way that the kind of division of labour amongst the coaching staff. So essentially, I think it was Naismith was saying that he focuses primarily on the team. All the team does on the ball, and then is it Gordon Forrest is mainly on the out of possession, and then with Frankie McAvoy mainly focusing on set pieces. It's an interesting way to kind of divide up the labour, and it's also interesting to publicly do that, because now if for instance, set pieces have been quite good recently, so Frankie McAvoy can get a lot of credit there, but if they're going rubbish or it doesn't really work, or the team are struggling in possession, people are going to go, well, Naismith, that's your job. It's not working. So I do wonder if maybe a wee bit down the line they might regret being quite so public about saying who's in charge of what and all that kind of stuff. But I did find that really interesting, though.
Yeah, I definitely found that, because you look at, like, fans will look at it and go, like, what does X do, what does Z do? Just the expectation the head coach does everything or is hands-on, and it seems Naismith is very hands-on. He oversees a lot, plenty of work goes into the detail, but then within that there's kind of delegation, like with Forrest with the out of possession and McAvoy with set play, so we don't have to actually do everything. And I kind of showed that there was I think there's suspicion around the assistants that Naismith, whether they were foisted upon him, but it does, like again last night, kind of just hammered home that he wanted these guys to be part of his team, his structure, and with merit behind it, rather than just kind of a token gesture that, right, I want him to do X, I want him to do Y, and I'll do Z as well. The big thing one of the things for me was the way he talked about Aidan Denham. And one of the questions, I think it was the first question that came up from the Q&A was a woman. She was asking about goals, and because it was the final question before that was about Shankland, and then she talked just about how the fact that it's Shankland in 18, Vargas on 3, own goals on 3, and about getting goals from elsewhere. And she mentioned about how Hearts, they always like a midfielder being able to pop up with goals. Talked about Paul Hartley before, Colin Cameron before. Naismith talked about he felt that the middle to, so they can attack in third, that's where probably Hearts have their most, it's like in football terms, immature players, where there's a lot more inconsistency. The guys are not at their peak. He said about Barry Mackay being missing, Liam Boyce being missing, but that he talked about Denham as being able to score goals from midfield, and because his timing of forwards runs is excellent, which will be a massive help to the team. And it's something that Naismith's been trying to do with Denham, and he's trying to put him in different positions, because at the start of the season we saw him, he was playing as a 6 basically against Rosenborg and against Dundee, and that's what we kind of thought he's just going to be a guy who recycled possession. Then we saw him play right wing back for the Scotland 21s, but he's been moved around in training, and he's been used as a number 10, for example. But you look at his attributes and qualities, I actually see him as probably as a kind of number 8 all action player.
I would think so, yeah, kind of box to box. Certainly someone making those kind of forward runs. I think the part of it as well is just the idea of like playing these players in different positions. It's just so they've got a better understanding of what's going on in the football pitch elsewhere. If you play a 90 minutes at right wing back, for instance, you've got a perfect understanding of if your centre mid's not getting close to you and that pass isn't on, like how it can all fall apart, and why it's so important you do that. So there's little things like that, I think, that come from just little lessons that come from just playing 90 minutes here, 90 minutes there. And it just gives you a better understanding of the role, so that when you're not playing in it, you understand exactly what everyone else is meant to be doing, how it all works, how it all clicks together. So I think, particularly when you're a young player, I think having those games where you are played kind of out of position or tried out in different areas, I think that's long term, it's really beneficial. And it just might mean in the short term that, you might have a player, for instance, like Denham playing in the number 6 position, say at Dundee, and it doesn't go right, and then you make mistakes, but that's all right though, because you learn from that and you move on from it. So it's those things where long term it's good, short term, as we saw, it can, mistakes can happen. That's all right though, because then it means that next time he's playing as that number 8, he's got a better understanding of what someone like Benny Benningham is doing behind him, for instance. So I think that probably is what you'd imagine, because he's got so much energy as well. He'd be wasted if he's just kind of standing around and not just getting involved and running all over the park, because he's got so much energy and so much enthusiasm. And I do think that you're right. He probably needs to be getting forward a little bit more and doing it a bit more regularly. But I think when you look at his skill set and what he can do, that kind of box-to-box guy, that guy who's going to run beyond the midfield, make those late runs onto the edge of the area, I think Denham could do that, absolutely.
We saw it against St Mirren, how heavily involved he was getting in the final third. So he went close with a shot in the first half, and he said afterwards when we were interviewing him that he feels the team don't take enough shots from outside the box, and that's something he would like to do more, which again is encouraging. Even though I think Naismith prefers Hearts to work it into a situation where there's a clearer shot.
I was going to say I'm with Naismith on that one. I don't like. Everyone likes watching goals going in from miles away. I mean, I think I said the other day that Alan Forrest's goal in the derby was my favourite Hearts goal this season. But they're in terms of again, people will roll their eyes and call me a nerd. Fine, but they're really low probability. Most of them don't go in, so it's a bad idea. If you make another couple of passes, you can get a great shot rather than rushing it and hitting an okay one. So I get it. Obviously it's aesthetically nice to watch guys pinging it in from miles out. It's always great, but I'm with Naismith in it. I'd much rather score a tap in from 6 yards out than sky over the bar from 30 yards.
Graham mentions one that was really interested in the part about the young players, and it was something that you touched on with Denham, in that you talked about moving around positions to get a better understanding of what is expected of each player, but also the mistakes. And Naismith talked about it, he's quite passionate about it, is that young players have to make mistakes when they come in. They learn from it, and it's not the end of their career. They come out. There's going to be bumps in the road for young players. There's a real desire to bring through young players, and they showed that 22 players have trained with the first team since they took over. 9 have gone on to go make appearances on the bench in competitive games, and 2 in Macaulay Tate and Aidan Denham have made their league debut. So there is a real concerted effort to get players in the team. And touching on that, it was encouraging that some of the GPS data that Hearts put out, 2 players that really stood out were Finlay Pollock and Macaulay Tate, in terms of the number of sprints they were making, the distance they were covering with what was it called? I've got to hear. What did they call it? It was high speed running distance. Finlay Pollock and Macaulay Tate covered some of the most distance, and in terms of max velocity and covering meters per second, so just kind of speed, Tate was the highest, followed by Pollock. And I know this is something that Hearts are wanting to do with the young players, is get more athleticism in the young players. Have them so they're strong runners, because you look down south, and if Hearts want to sell players, and most likely will be down south where they get the most money, Championship clubs, Premier League clubs want guys who can run. So it was interesting to see that Pollock and Tate were so high up, because you look at Macaulay Tate, you're like, well, I imagine he's he's pretty slow. He's just like a kind of number 6 ball playing midfielder. But Naismith talked about him that he needs to be quicker than everybody else because of his size. That he can't get involved in a physical battle, so he has to be quicker, both in between in his head and movement as well. So that was something that really stood out for me when you were looking kind of deep into the GPS data that Pollock and Tate were scoring so high.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's probably just down to, maybe it's a silly point, but just they're young guys eager to make an impression. They probably are given that extra few percent more than maybe other guys are, just because it does. If you're trying to break into the first team, you are going to be trying that a little bit harder. I think that's natural. But yeah, it's an interesting point to make that these are, and particularly somebody like Tate, who you think that's not his game. He's not like a winger. It's not his job to go sprinting and after the ball into big open spaces all the time. He's there to work in small, tight areas. So again, yeah, it's another string to his bow, and like you say, because of his like kind of physical profile, because of his stature, he does have to play differently. He can't get drawn into a physical battle. He's not like someone like Beningame who can get the ball under pressure, can use his body, get in the way, and like really kind of defeat an opponent that way. That's not his kind of player. He's not that kind of player. So I think certainly Denham and Denham's the obvious like kind of poster boy from the academy for this season so far. Tate, I think we probably will end up seeing more of him as the season goes on, just because, as I've said before, Hearts don't really have another number 6. Not really. He's probably the closest thing you can find. And the Hearts, I'd imagine, for most games between now and the end of the season, will be playing with a number 6. So just think he will get more minutes that way. So I still think we could definitely see a wee bit more of him, but I do think, like you say, there's these two players who have gone on to make their debuts. There are a lot that have been on the bench, obviously considered good enough to play in the Premiership should it come to it, if there's an injury or whatever. So I think it is encouraging, but it's one of these things where it just takes time. There's just absolutely no shortcut with it. And that's the reason Hearts have invested all this money in the B team. Though, like if you're, you need to have players making a step up and supplementing the first team squad, because if that's not happening, there's no point in having a B team, is there?
Yeah, I absolutely. And that's something that Naismith said to me when I spoke to him a few weeks ago, was that the B team could win the Lone League five years in a row, but if they don't produce anything for the first team, then it's failed. And I do think that longer term they need to. I think they are wary about. It comes to a point where it's about trying to bridge that next gap, because we've seen it with Mackenzie Kirk, that he scored all these goals in the Lone League, but he's not ready for the first team. He has to go out on loan to Hamilton, and it's about that. I think Frankie McAvoy talked about it. Talked about politics with the B teams and how it's the B teams or Colts are viewed compared to in Europe. I've certainly been quite vocal in the past about not wanting B teams in the pyramid, just because I just think that's Scottish football's got a certain tradition. But then when you just put your maroon tinted spectacles on and nothing else, then you can say, yeah, let's just get them in League 2, get them in League 1, so they're competing at this level. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time. Was there anything else that stood out for you?
I suppose there was one bit as well where I think it was when Naismith was talking about. I think it was Naismith was talking about recruitment, and he was saying that he wants to get to the point where when Hearts sign a player, they get that. Well, I think he said they get 6 months basically to settle in, adapt, acclimatise, and then from that point on, that's when you can really start expecting them to start making a big impact in the first team. Certainly, when you look at the summer signings from this season, you'd imagine that's you'd hope that's the case for most of them. I think Frankie Kent's the obvious exception, but after that, you look at guys like Vargas, Tagawa as well, who's not really played much at all. Nooff as well, to an extent. Guys who've come in and they've been all right, but they've not really quite kicked on yet. They're not quite shown exactly what they've brought, what they can bring to this team. So I think that it's interesting to see that that's a thing where Naismith seems quite confident that in time that will come, and that they get that little bedding in period, because we've seen particularly with guys like Tagawa. I think he's the most obvious example of someone who has come in and he has struggled to bed in, and he's not been getting much in the way of game time as a result of that. So I did think that was interesting, because I know as well, particularly, you see Hearts fans online and they say they want, players, like first team players, ready to come straight into the starting 11 and hit the ground running. And the truth is that, yeah, okay, you get guys like Kent like that who come along, and that's great, but not every player is like that. Most are going to, particularly if you're shopping in these markets, like Japan or Costa Rica, it is going to take time for these kind of guys to settle in and get used to the culture, the new environment, the new teammates, the language, everything. So it does take time. So I did think that was really interesting, though, and it maybe gives a bit of hope to people who have maybe not been particularly impressed with the likes of Nooff or Tagawa so thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key thing is for Naismith, he wants squad continuity, because again he was being involved in Hearts squads where there was massive churn, massive turnover in players, massive overhaul. It's hard to build a foundation. It's hard to build a kind of team ethos, team spirit when you're changing players all the time. And I think he wants it. It was like, doesn't want to lose much more than 10-15% of players each season, and then just kind of supplement it with the odd signing with the players coming from the academy. And I think you'll see with Hearts, and it's been noticeable the last few years, there's been different profiles of signings. You've got guys who are more in the peak of their career. You look at like Xander Clark and Lauren Shankland and Frankie Kent. And then you've got guys who come from abroad who need time to settle, and you've got younger guys like Lewis Nielsen. And Hearts are mainly shopping for potential. I think guys who are signed, who are 25, 26, 27, maybe 28, they'll be guys at that age. You can probably tell that they're earmarked for a important position straight away. They might play regularly from Nooff just because they've got that experience, they've got that grounding, and they come in and do it like Frankie Kent has. And then guys who are 24 and younger, I would expect them to, in an ideal world for Naismith and Hearts, to come in and be bit part at most, just be in the background, like you said, like Vargas and Nooff, probably two players who've probably had to play a wee bit more than maybe what was expected. And he did talk about Nooff. That was one that's probably raised a few eyebrows, in that he praised him a lot. I've got the quote here. Where is it? I think somebody who's taken time to settle, who is progressing, and I think will be a really good player, is Callum Nooff. He's somebody who'll take the ball anywhere, wants to take control of the game, can get up and down the pitch. He'll be a good player here. He just needs time, because I do think that he has played. He's played a lot of football. I think he's played the most minutes of all signings except from Frankie Kent. And you read some of his quotes, and you probably read between the lines why he's maybe ahead of Cammy Devlin in the pecking order. I don't think he's been as as consistent and as forceful in terms of what Hearts particularly need in midfield. But it's clear that not just from there, but speaking to Nathan before, he's a big fan of Nooff.
Oh, he definitely is. Yeah, I mean, I've not got the figures to hand, but he must have, out of all the midfielders at Hearts this season, he must have played the most in terms of minutes. So I just think, because obviously Peningwe had an injury, Lowry and Grant have been in and out of the team, Devlin's been out of the team. I think it's got to be Nooff, and it's got to be Nooff by a distance, I would imagine. So I think, yeah, that tells you everything you need to know. Naismith clearly likes him, he clearly trusts him, and then, like you say, you get that testimonial like that, an endorsement like that, and that just shows that Naismith clearly does he really does believe there's a player in there, And again, I'm with you, where I think that there might well be, but I just don't think we've seen it often enough yet. And I think while Nooff's had good games, I don't think there's ever been any games where we've walked away and went, "Oh, Nooff was absolutely brilliant today." Whereas I think most other players in the squad at some point or another, we've had at least a few games where we've went away and go, "Oh, he was great." Whereas Nooff, it's always been like, "Oh yeah, he was good."
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So I think it's that way where I think he can still contribute a lot more. But as you say, I mean, Naismith clearly believes that he can, and that's everything. So I mean, I always kind of forget Nooff. He's what, 22?
22, yeah. Just checking.
Yeah. I tend to, in my head, I've got him down as like 25, 26. I'm always a bit surprised when I quickly check his age. I'm, oh god, yeah, he's only 22. So again, we give people like Vargas leeway, we give Tagawa and Oda leeway. Why not? Presumably he deserves it too, right?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that point where Naismith talked about you can get away with being inconsistent as a winger or a forward compared to a midfielder. Again, I think it was signed. Was that a 3-year deal? I think he was a 3-year deal. Tiger was a 4-year deal, and yeah. Like I said, he's 22. So yeah, he is one of the players we've talked about that you want to see more from. Just for me, in that, because I've watched a lot of when Hearts were linked with signing him, I spent a wee bit of time on Wyscout and watched a fair bit of him from his time in Australia, and you got excited by him because he was someone who would stride forward with the ball and take it and have a shot at goal, score a couple of screamers, and you're just thinking, right, that's the type of player you want from midfield. But again, he came in, and Naismith might be shaping him into a different player who does like control the ball and is more supports the play than gets involved higher up the pitch, and that could be take a wee bit of time to adapt.
No, absolutely. You know, we've seen with I wrote a thing last week, I think it was, about Benny Beningame, about how he's changed. About, you know, when he was first signed at Hearts, he was like this brilliant ball winner in midfield, and now under Naismith, he's became this guy. He's a brilliant number 6, and they're two very different sorts of roles, two very different kind of positions. And again, you know, so we've seen that happen in that instance. So I don't see why it couldn't happen again with Nooff. Again, he's young, he's still acclimatising, and he's, to be fair, like I said earlier, he's played an awful lot of football as well. So you'd imagine the more minutes he gets, the faster he'll acclimatise, the more he gets used to the league, the physicality of it, the pace of it, and that can only be a good thing. So yeah, he's definitely one where, it's one of those ones I don't always see it with him, to be honest, but like Naismith definitely does. You can tell. Yeah. Like, Naismith's definitely a big fan.
Before we finish and get on to a couple of the comments, just wanted to bring up it was interesting that towards the end of Naismith's presentation, he brought up a lot of stats, and he said that they use them as an indication. A lot of them are what kind of stuff that we've used in the past via StatsBomb, and kind of just looked at basically the stats back up that Hearts are a good team when they're in their shape, and that's when they've got their shape, they're a good pressing team, but they're not an effective pressing unit when the team lose the ball high up the pitch, or they look to press teams high up the pitch, that they don't get as, they don't win the ball back as much as they want. And that was a big thing from Naismith. He talked about how there's still a lot of work to do in the final third, both in possession and out possession. He brought up about the XG per shot. Basically just said Hearts are creating a lot of chances or having a lot of shots, but they're low quality, so they need to do better to work openings, and that's something that he believes that should happen. So I found that encouraging, that yes, the management team are very much aware that there needs to be improvement in the final third.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's clear enough for pretty much everyone to see, particularly obviously in possession. Like, we know that it can be a little bit pedestrian at times. It can get a bit laboured in the final third when it comes to trying to create chances. And as you say, the stats back it up. You know, there's certainly the Hearts fans themselves will know it. You don't need to look at any stats to know that Hearts don't really win the ball back in the final third, because, well, when was the last time Hearts had a really well executed counter attack? You know, it doesn't really happen. You know, we don't. You know, that's not the way the team plays. That they don't. And part of that's because of the system, because if you win the 5-3-2, for instance, you've basically got, you know, the two forwards, maybe a midfielder, maybe a wing back pressing up. If the opposition's got more numbers, they can just pass it around you. So yeah, part of it's probably to do with the team's shape, just in that Hearts often find themselves at a numerical disadvantage in those areas anyway. So it does make life more difficult when you are pressing. There are ways around that, but it means that the way your team presses has to become a lot more sophisticated. And, you know, as Naismith touched on, that does take time. You know, there's no easy fix. I think you start with the basics, and you know, it slowly becomes more advanced over time, more sophisticated over time. But it's one of those things you'd rather that, you know, like most things in football, you know, you'd rather, you know, sort the defence out, make sure that's working all right. You know, the middle bit, okay, that's working all right. You build out from the back. You know, these are you get the foundations in place, and then you add in the more difficult or intricate parts, and that seems to be what we're seeing as well. And that seems to be what Naismith's saying.
I suppose I'll kind of bundle these two comments together to finish with. It was so Corbetto Baggio Liam says things like last night mean nothing if we don't win. It's really that simple. And it's and James Govan says, "Did last night make you believe in Naismith as a head coach at Hearts and beyond?" So I think, yeah, it's fans really only care what happens on Saturday, and that's the be all or end all. But I do think events like last night help get credit in the bank, and help just help with perception that Naismith seem to do that. There's 350 fans in that room. If majority of them are impressed, they'll go back and tell other fans, and I think he just gets that buy-in, which is important when there is a poor result or there's a poor run, that he's kind of explained these things, and it might give fans a better understanding. So yeah, I do completely get Hearts need to win games, and that's all that matters. But I do think stuff like that helps create perception and endears Naismith and management team to the fans as well. I do think the fans enjoyed last night. I think it was impressive kind of presentation. The Q&A was all dealt with really well. They didn't shirk any questions. And then James asked if didn't make him believe in Naismith as a head coach. I think last night wasn't definitive. It was just another kind of building block, but it's been an impressive few months in Naismith's first full season as a head coach, having come out playing and then coaching in the Lowland League. So I think it was just another encouraging evening to back up what's the progress that's already happened over the last couple of months.
I would have thought so. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have thought that anyone would have went in there and been like, if they were loving Naismith and then they heard his responses and oh yeah, that's great. I don't think there's anyone that would have went in going, decided they wanted rid of him. I don't think they'd have been convinced either. These kind of nights, they are just good, like you say, for helping fans to get in, just feel involved, and which obviously a football club, particularly a fan-owned football club, that's really important. Just to have that sense of community, that sense of shared identity, and all that kind of stuff. In terms of Naismith's coaching chops, I don't think there's ever been a doubt that he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the coaching and tactical side of things. Obviously he's doing his badges. He's got that experience of the Lowland League with Hearts B. I mean, he was working with Steve Clarke in the Scotland setup for a while as well. And Steve Clarke's an absolutely fantastic manager, as I'm sure as we can all agree at the moment. Things are going great with Scotland, but people forget how Steve Clarke's played a huge part in that Champions League that Chelsea won in 2012 or whenever it was, when he was look back at those matches. That was a Clarke team. Anyway, so I'm getting to that. But yeah, my point is, he's well regarded by other coaches in the game. He's got this wealth of experience. He's played under some absolutely wonderful managers throughout his career. And he's always been as a player, he was always a really intelligent player on the park. So I think that all those things point to someone who understands tactics, who understands the game, who thinks about the game. And I guess, just, nights like Wednesday, that just helps to underline it. If you can go and give a 90-minute presentation about it, and that's just a little snapshot of what's been going on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis. I think it maybe, I don't think it's really altered my perception of him, but perhaps there are some fans who are looking at it and just going, the ones who maybe were going, John Naismith, easy hire, cheap hire, maybe didn't think much of his appointment to begin with. Maybe stuff like that can help slowly change their minds. Yeah,
and that's I just think it was such the Naismith was really keen for the event, and I think it's just such an easy win to get fans on board and just help build that kind of perception off them, and just get buy-in, just get credit, just involve, like you said, just involve fans. I think that's it's a massive help that when a bad result does come, he's got that wee bit more time, maybe fans will have that wee bit more patience, which I think every manager in the game wants. Right, James, I know you have got plenty to get on with, so we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me to discuss that, and thank you very much everyone for listening and continuing to subscribe. If you want more detail about the manager event, go on to heartstandard.co.uk, and it'll be at the top of the site. So there's plenty of stuff to get your teeth into in there. We'll probably be back tomorrow, roughly the same time, to look ahead to the Spartans match. So until then, thank you very much, and goodbye. End stream.